Begin the current Daf in Mesech Kesuvos Daf Mem Tes. We begin on the beginning of the Yomid. The Gemara is in the middle of a discussion regarding halacha Mosar Av L'Shluchei Abal. What's the status of, as we spoke about in the previous Mishnah, regarding the transfer of the rights in the woman from the father to the husband? And one of those middle type of categories was when he didn't do chutbah yet, but it's not in the father's domain anymore. Now Gemara is in the middle of characterizing that status of Mosar Av L'Shluchei Abal. Something that's discussed in today's daf are the source that chuppah through Mosar Av L'Shluchei Abal cannot be undone. The next Mishnah continues regarding the thing that the father is not obligated to feed his daughter. Now, there's two types of halachic obligations. There's a chayva, that's an obligation enforceable in Bezdin, and there's a mitzvah, it's an obligation that's not enforceable in Bezdin. So the Mishnah tells us that there's no chayva to support one's daughters, but there's a machlokes whether there's a mitzvah to support one's sons and daughters. The Gemara also begins a discussion of different takanas usha, different institutions that the Chachamim made when the Sanhedrin were in Usha. And one of them is here, Adam Zanas Bandas B'naisu Kishin Gitana, that a person should feed his sons and daughters when they are young. So the Mishnah in the previous daf said, Mosar Av L'Shluchei Abal Ari B'Shus Abal. So the Gemara, the machlokes, to what extent is this considered like chuppah? We had four different sheets again, Yosha, we had different things, Subasa, what exactly did that mean that it's B'Shus Abal? Then the Gemara cited a brayso that Mosar Av L'Shluchei Abal B'Zinsa. Let's say the father just sent her over to the agent's husband, she was Mizana then. So Ariz B'Chenek said, Tibi Katzeli Chuppah B'Dei when she was Mizana, she's punished with Chenek as Nesua. Now it's Skila as Narusa, because we said the pasuk regarding Naimarasa said, Uskuluha, where they talk about Skila of Achir Baba, Mesik Yasan, we saw Lizna's base of Vio. It has to be in her father's household, Pracha Mosar Av L'Shluchei Abal. If he already said it's not a base of Vio anymore, then you're not going to get Skila. Now, our Gemara continues now on this theme of, well, Taisus has one way of explaining it, but the way Rashi says it is that this is just a general question. And it says not even such a big question, it's because we said in the Mishnah that after she was given over to the Shluchei Abal, we're saying she's B'Shus Abal. That sounds like that even if she's on her way back to her father's household, let's say that husband died and she's already on her way back, she already left her father's domain. Because we know the halacha, as we just established at the end of the previous daf, that the giving over of the agents from an extra pasuk of Beis Aviyah. So therefore the Gemara has the following question. Ve'ema say, Heicha the Hadr L'Bei Nasha, when she goes back to her father's household, maybe Hadr L'Milsa Kamaisa, she goes back to the original status, and we will say that if she's going to Zana, she's going to have Skila, because she's going to go back to Liznai's Beis Aviyah. Because again, we don't really know that she's not in the father's household anymore. It's because of the extra words of Beis Aviyah. We said, what is that coming to tell us? So he said, must be telling us that when she's not in her house literally anymore, it's Mosar Av L'Shluchei Abal, then she's going to have Chenek. But when she comes back, maybe she goes right back to that status of Liznai's Beis Aviyah, and then she's going to get Skila. Rabbi says, no. That was already established by the Brisa of Yeshiva B'Yishmael, that she does not go back to her original status, to be as if she had never been given over to the Shluchei Abal. Where do we find this? Because the Talmud Rabbi Shmuel, it's taught in the Brisa of B'Yishmael, it says a pasuk in Mamidbar. It says, we learned this out from the halacha of Faras Nadar. It says, V'nedra Amana Gurusha, the vow of a widow or divorcee, halacha is kol asher ascha nafsha yakum alav. Whatever she makes prohibit on herself, she has to fulfill. Now, the question is, Matam Alayna. Why do you have to write yakum alav? Who's going to nullify her vow? That we only said that a vow could be nullified either in a daughter in her father's household before she gets married, or her husband when she got married. This woman who was widowed from when she got married, she's not anymore under her father's jurisdiction. She was taken away from her husband because she got widowed or divorced. So what do you have to tell me? Of course, Yakum Allah. No one's being made for it. So Ella, rather, the pasuk is coming to tell you, not for the halacha of a widow or divorcee from marriage, because that says in Beis Isha Nadara Isha Yifarana, if she took the vow by her husband's household, her husband will nullify, and her husband's not alive. Rather, it's for a widow that was widowed from the Mesiras of the Shluchim. that she was given over to the agents. She never even had a full-fledged nisuin of like chop. If the father gave her over to the agents of the husband, all the father's agents gave her over to their husband's agent. She was widowed on the journey, or she was divorced. Where up until this point, the Psukim didn't really tell you only the halacha of the one who takes the vow in her father's household and the one who takes the vow in her husband's household. This woman who took the vow, the way Rashi learns it, on the journey when she was given over to the agents, that I don't know. How am I going to recite regarding her halacha? Is it based on Via Shalzu? Is she in the household of her father? Or based on Bala Shalzu? Is she in the household of her husband? Ella, rather, therefore, the pasuk comes to tell us, to tell you and to teach you that it's not called Beis Avi anymore. Rather, it's called Beis Isha. And because since she left her father's domain for one moment, and she was not emptied out to the father's domain with the death of her husband. It's called Nisroikin. By Arison, for example, there's halacha of Nisroikin. But here, once it is Mosa of the Shluch Abal, the father cannot nullify anymore. So obviously she does not go back to original status. Because like we said, if she was widowed from engagement from Arison, if she wasn't given over yet to the Shluch Habal, that is Mishnah teaching the Dom of Ayim and Alf. When the husband dies, it's called Nisroikna. Gets emptied out, gets poured back into the father's domain, which we learn that out from Sukkot. So although when she's engaged, they each have to nullify part of that. When he dies, the husband, the Chatan, then she's going to go back to her father. But Masav L'Shluch Habal, that is what the pasuk is coming to teach me over here. This almano or this gerusha, of course, Yakamala. Who's going to nullify it? No, because you would have thought to say she goes back to her father's household because she wasn't even married yet. She was just Masav L'Shluch Habal. That's the pasuk is coming to teach me that no, you have to really learn it from Tanur Bishmo that she doesn't go back to Musa Kamaisa. That's considered not Bishos Ab anymore because she already left Sha'achas from the father's domain. Now, finishing off the conversation from yesterday, from the previous daf, Amar Papa says, Afananam Tinina. We also learned in the Mishnah Masechta Sanhedrin, like the Bryce we taught in the previous daf, that we had mentioned, that we said that once the father gave her over to the Shluch Abal, we said she already has halachic status as a Nesua. Even though she didn't even have Chuppah and the Zicha not Nivala, she's already going to get the Misa Chenek if she's Mizana as a Eishes, not as an Ayam Arasa. That was what a Bryce we had. Now the Gemara supports it from a Mishnah in Sanhedrin. Mishnah says, Abal Nayam Arasa, if someone has been with a engaged Naira, and the Chayiv is not going to be liable for the halacha of Nayam Arasa, for her to get Skila. Ad, Shtei Nara, she has to be a pubescent girl. Besula, a virgin. Mayrasa, it's engaged. And fourth of all, he beves to be in her father's house. So the Gemara goes through these pieces. Vishlam and Nara, I understand what does it mean that Nara, but Lebeges means that she's not already 12 and a half. When it says a Besula, a virgin, means that she did not have B once before. Mayrasa, engaged, means that she's not married, meaning she didn't have Chuppah yet, even though there was no Bia. Because if you had Bia, that already would know from Besula. So then when it says when it says in the father's house, what's that coming to exclude? Lav Mute is not coming to exclude Masar Av L'Shluch Abal. It's not in her father's household anymore. He already gave her over to the agents because Chuppah already know from excluding the Suah. Must be it's excluding in Masar Av L'Shluch Abal. That's what we're not. That has to be a Vesaviyah, and therefore you see that you're going to get Chenik. Then it's not going to be Skila anymore. And Omer of Nachman Yitzchak says Afananam Tinin. We also learned this in another Mishnah Masechta Sanhedrin. Mishnah says Abal Eishes. Someone has to be with a married woman. And once she had entered to her husband's household for marriage, even if her husband did not have be with her yet, whoever has be with her has the punishment of strangulation, which is the misa of Eishes of Znus with a married woman. Now, the words are if she entered into her husband's domain. It doesn't say nichnas l'chuppah. It just says she entered into her husband's domain. Shema, what you could infer from that is that the punishment of chenek is even by the halacha of Mosar Av L'Shluch Abal, even that is considered a nichnas l'shus abal, and therefore that would already mandate chenek and not skila anymore. Now we get to halacha, the next Mishnah, which again continues on this theme regarding the obligations and the rights that a father and a husband have in the woman. Going back now to the halacha of the father. Says the Mishnah Av, Ein Chayv B'Mzenis Bitei, which is really the thing we had in the prior Mishnah regarding the husband having the obligation to feed his wife, which we didn't mention that regarding the father. And here the Mishnah actually says that the father does not have to feed his daughter when he's alive. The Gemara doesn't explain why you're picking specifically daughter versus sons. But Zem Medrash Dadash Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, which was on the day when they appointed him to be the Nasi, as the Gemara says in Brachas of Chavches, this is what he expounded Lufnei Chachamim Beken B'Yavna, in front of the sages in the vineyard of Yavna. It's not really a vineyard, it's because that the Beis Medrash was in rows like a vineyard, so it's called Ken B'Yavna, which we says in the Ksuba that Habanim Yirshu, the sons should inherit, Vabanas Yizainu, and the daughters should get fed. Meaning, there are two takanas that the Chachamim instituted in the Tanayim and the stipulations of the Ksuba. Vabanim Yirshu, which that's what's known as Ksubas Benin Dichrin. Ksubas Benin Dichrin means the Ksuba of the male sons. So Mishnah teaches later on that in Bezim Abayz, the words of the Ksuba are this. Benin Dichrin, the Havi Leichin, the male sons that you're going to have from me, Inun Yaltun Kesef Ksubasayach, they're going to inherit the money of your Ksuba. So even though a woman usually gets a Ksuba, but if she dies first, the husband inherits her. So she's not getting a Ksuba. So he says, don't worry, your sons will inherit your Ksuba after the father passed away. Yes, more than the portion that they're getting just with splitting the father's inheritance with their brothers. That's the Abanim Yirshu. That's Ksubas B'den Dichrin. And later on, the Gemara in the Ksuba, in the Gemara is going to explain exactly what is the Ksubas B'den Dichrin. And the Vabanas Yizainu, what does that mean? It says in the Ksuba, B'non Nukvan, the female children, the Yahavim Lechem Enai that you have for me, Inun Yahavim Yosem B'Beisi, they're going to sit in my house. And they're going to get fed from my estate until they become a begettes, or if they get married, until they get married to men. So there's two takanas mentioned in the Ksuba. One is that the sons will inherit the Ksuba of their mother, and the other one is that the daughters will get fed. So it says Rabbi Elazar Azariah the following drasha. The day he was appointed to Nasi, a younger man, he got appointed, he gave the following drasha. He made a comparison. He said, Mahaban in the Yershin, just like the sons don't inherit their mother's ksuba el acham isab, and that's only after the father passed away. And that's actually the word it says in the ksuba. It says inun yartu. It says they can inherit. And that's how the Gemara in Bava Basra and Yesh Neichel explains that Bonim Yirshu is going on this ksubas within the Neichel, like we're explaining. That's obviously only after the father passed away, who he inherited their mother's ksuba. So Avabon is so too. Therefore, the takana of the daughters getting fed, and in the zayin is el acham isabim, they're only getting fed after the father's death. So he's just proving this point that the father does not have to feed his daughters. It says in the Ksuba that the daughters have to be fed. That's after the father passed away, they're going to get fed from his estate. But ironically, when he's alive, he actually has no obligation to feed them. Now, the Gemara makes the following deal. From the words of the Mishnah, that said a father has no obligation to feed his daughter, so there's two elements of that halacha. There's ein chayev, no obligation, and there's also the mezainis biter, from the sustenance of his daughter. So says the Gemara, the mezainis biter hu de ein chayev. 2 points. It sounds like in the Mishnah that the sustenance of his daughter, he has no obligation that's enforceable in court to feed when he's alive. Ha, the mezainis benai chayev. Sounds like, but to feed his son, he would be obligated when he's alive. So to another diak, bita nami, his daughter also chaybu deleka. Sounds like, there's no obligation that's enforceable in bezin. A mitzvah ikka, but there is an obligation, just not enforceable, to feed his daughters. Based on those two diukim, the Gemara says that mani masni. Who's our Mishnah like? Loida meya, loida biuda, but loida. Remember that it's not like the following 3 tanaim that we have in the following brisa. It's not like learn the brisa. The brisa says the first opinion is mitzvah losing as abundance. There is a mitzvah to feed one's daughters, all the more so to sons. Why? To ask about Torah, because the sons, they toil in Torah. But there's no obligation that they remit. Next opinion, Rabbi Yehuda, he says, mitzvah losing as abundant. There's a mitzvah to feed the sons, no obligation, mitzvah, meaning not enforceable. And for sure there's a mitzvah to feed the daughters. Why? Because it's more degrading for girls not to have food. Boys could go knock on doors. The third opinion, he says, is the obligation to feed the daughters after the father passed away, which that's the Tanai Ksuba. When the father's alive, both sons and daughters are not fed, meaning there's not even a mitzvah. So Gemara says, who's our Mishnah? As the Gemara goes through to show, it can be like any one of the three. As the Gemara explains. Either mayor, if it's a mayor, what did he say? He said, Banim is mitzvah. We were medayik from the Mishnah. The words of the Mishnah were that ha'av ein chayiv b'mezaynis bita. Sounds like, but he's chayiv b'mezaynis banav, and we see in Remeir not like that because he says the banim is only mitzvah. Opinion number 2, Ida Bihuda, banim not mitzvah. He really was saying the same thing that he's just going the kabel the other way. But he was saying that there's a mitzvah to feed the sons, kabel the daughters. But again, the sons are only a mitzvah, not a chayvah. I'm just makes it sound like that it's a chayvah to feed the sons, and just not a chayvah to feed the daughter. But that's not like Rabbi Yehuda either. And regarding the third opinion, Rabbi Yechim Reika, he says afil mitzvah nami leka. He says there's not even a mitzvah to feed the sons and the daughters. That's for sure not like our Mishnah, which said that it sounds like there's a chayvah to feed the son, and that is a mitzvah to feed the daughter. So who's our Tanah Mishnah? So the Gemara says you could actually be like, although we said it's not like either one of them, it could actually be like any one of them. If you want, you can say Yomei. If you want, you can say Yomei. You can say Yomei. How? So the Gemara explains. If you want, you can say it's like Remeir. Because this is what the Mishnah is saying. The father does not have to feed his daughter, and the truth is, same thing, you don't have to feed the son. But there is a mitzvah to feed one's daughter, and for sure there's a mitzvah to feed the sons. This that it says that you don't have no obligation to feed your daughter. In other words, why are you picking daughter? It's not to infer as we originally did to say, oh, but the son there is a chiyur. No, it's only because, as we had quoted Reb Meir in the Brisa, that he holds that it's more of a chiyuv to feed the son than the daughter, because sons learn Torah. If he would have said you don't have to feed, you're not obligated to be this benai, I would have thought to say that yes, your son there's no obligation, but that there's a mitzvah. But by his daughter, there's not even a mitzvah. So this that we said that you don't have an obligation to feed the daughter, what we wanted to say with this is, we said to tell you the inference, but that there is a mitzvah. Oh, and for sure the same way by the son, but there's no chayva. As we continue on the base, to tell you that that even one's daughter, which is lesser of a chiyuv because they don't learn Torah, that only chayvu deleka, there's no obligation that's enforceable in court. But there is an obligation of a mitzvah to do that. That's why you say you're not chayv to feed your daughter to tell you, but there's a mitzvah. Of course, there's son that there's a mitzvah because sons learn Torah. But a chayva, he didn't say that in anyone. It's not to be medayik bita in a chayv, but son is chayv. No, it's to make the deek that the daughter will have a mitzvah and that the son for sure will also have a mitzvah. That's the interpretation you want to say is like a meir. People say Rabbi Yehuda, you want to say like a Yehuda. This is the way you have to learn the Mishnah. Our Mishnah said the father does not have to feed his daughter, and the closer came the daughter. Why? Because according to Rabbi Yehuda, there's more of a chiyuv to feed a daughter than the son, because the daughter has zilusa, is this degrading for a girl not to get fed. Now, so this time I'm saying you don't have to feed the daughter. Of course, I would know you don't have to feed the son. A mitzvah, but regarding a mitzvah, the benai ikka, but there is a mitzvah by the son. And all the more so that there's a mitzvah by daughters. So why do you say the halacha by daughter and not by son? It's Hakamashlo wanted to teach you that that even by daughter chayva leka, that there's no chayva, because even though there's zilusa by the daughter, there's more chayv to feed her. You would have thought to say, if I would have told you that there's no chiyuv by the son, but there's a mitzvah, and I would say for sure there's a mitzvah by the daughter, I would have thought to say no, maybe there's even a chiyuv to feed the daughter because there's zilusa. So I said no bita in the chayv in this, but not to tell you that the son there is a chayva. No, to tell you that even by bita there's no chayva, but there's going to be a mitzvah by both the son and the daughter. Now, the Ibai same if one you could say Rabbi Yechim Bereika, it's the third opinion. This is what the Mishnah is saying. You don't have to feed your daughter, and the truth is, something is for the son. And the truth is definitely mitzvah namileka. That actually, forget about there's no chayva, there's not even a mitzvah. So, not that so why are we saying chayva? That was the whole deep we were built on. The inference was no chayva, but it would be a mitzvah. And you tell me that there's not even a mitzvah. Why are you saying ain't chayva? Say even bigger chayva. Say no mitzvah. You're right. But if I the bun is lacha misabin, it's only because the daughters after the father passed away. Chayva is an obligation that's enforceable by the courts because it's a Tanai Niksuba. So Tanami in a chayv, when he's alive, we use the same terminology of not chayiv. but not to make the dig, but that there's a mitzvah. It's only because of the symmetry of the cases that we're talking about. When he's alive and when he's dead. When he's dead, there's a shiur that's enforceable by the courts. So we're saying when he's alive, we're saying ein chai, but not to make the dig that there's a mitzvah. Truth is, it's even like Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, who b'chayavian, there's not even a mitzvah to support one's sons and one's daughter. So that is me'ikra din. But now the Gemara quotes Takanes Usha. These are regulations that were initiated by the Chacham when the Sanhedrin was in the city of Usha. The first one relates to the halacha we just mentioned. Amar Abba Amar Shlakish, B'Shemer Yehuda Bar Chanina. It says, B'Usha Hiskinu. When the Sanhedrin was in Usha, which was one of the 10 exiles that the Sanhedrin made, as the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah, so in Usha they instituted the following halacha. Although we just finished saying there's no chiv to feed one's children, which places does bring, in the Gemara later on of Samachay Amid Beis, that however that very small children, according to everyone, there is an obligation to feed. But we're talking about like older children, that although we just finished to say you don't have to feed your children when you're alive, but in Usha they instituted that a person should feed his sons and daughters when they're small, until they develop puberty, that a person should feed his kids. Now, Ibola, the following question. Is halacha like him, meaning like Rabbi Law who said this Takanas Usha, or in halacha or is halacha not like him? So Tashma says, well, it's being a raya that halacha is not like him. Rather, we tell people to feed their kids. Maybe they'll listen, but we don't force them. Where do we find this? Because when they would come in front of Rabbi Yehuda, and there would be parents who didn't want to feed their kids, he would tell them, Yarud Yoldo, a jackal, a tanin, or some type of a snake or serpent, it gives birth, and he's cruel on his children. And he throws their obligation to be fed on the people of the city. So you see that he was trying to intimidate him, but he wasn't forcing him to feed his kids. So to Kiava also come into Rav Chizah, when they would come to Rav Chizah complaining about a father not feeding his kids, you tell them, Kfule Asisa, have him turn upside down a mortar on its face, Bitzibura in public, V'leikum, let him stand on the bottom, which now is higher up, as a platform that they should hear his voice and they should announce on himself. V'leima, let him say that he's worse than the ravens, because Urdva Boyibane, the ravens need their kids, but this guy doesn't need his kids. Says Gemara, ravens really need their kids? But it says the pasuk in Tehillim, Hashem provides for the sons of the ravens that they call out, obviously because the ravens don't feed their kids and they call out to Hashem and Hashem gives them. Says Gemara, yeah, loy kash, not difficult. Ha b'chivri, when do they disregard their kids is when they're white. Ha b'uchmi, when do they pay attention to them and they need their kids is when they're black. Which Taisa says they're different species, but Rashi says when they get older they get black, and then the mother and the father love them. But in the beginning when they're white, they hate them. So it's not a contradiction. But there are times when they do want them, and this guy's worse than the ravens, who he doesn't pay for their sustenance, and even the ravens take care of their kids. So to have Asal Kamid Rava, when a person would come in front of Rava, Amalei would tell him, do you really want your kids to be provided from charity? So you see that again, they wouldn't force it. So the halacha is not like this halacha of Rabbi Lai. But the Gemara does qualify. We didn't say that we don't force. Only if the father is not a wealthy person. If he's wealthy, then we force him against his will that it should only be by charity, even if it's not his kids. Which Taisa has a whole discussion. So we don't force a person to give charity, because charity is one of the things that's called matnas chara b'tzida. The Torah says you get a certain reward for that. And the Gemara Chulin tells us that any mitzvah say that matnas chara b'tzida, the courts don't force on. Taisa says, you're right, it might mean we force them with words, or maybe there's certain set amounts that the city made that you have to give chodesh geld, and therefore that you can force for. And also another pshat says it's besides the mitzvah say there's also two negative prohibitions, amitz and lisikvitz, until we can force on those negative prohibitions and not on the positive commandment. So possibly you could force for tzedakah to be given. That's what the Gemara is saying. But if a guy has as a man of means, we force him to feed his kids. Ki hadu Rabba, like we find by Rabba, the kafir let Rav Nosson bar Ami, he forced Rav Nosson bar Ami for charity. The apik minei dal nezuz tzedakah, and he extracted from him 400 zuz for tzedakah. You see that you can force someone to give tzedakah, and the same thing is obviously for one's kids. There's no bigger tzedakah, psach al salim, to go ahead and feed one's kids. That's one takana. Another takana of Usha is again another teaching from Amr below Amr of Shlakish. He says, "Usha is kinu." In Usha they instituted hakaisim kol nachasav lebanav. Someone writes all his estate to his sons, so he's left with nothing. So in Usha they instituted hu ve'ishta nizayin man. Him and his wife could be provided from the estate, even if the father already wrote it all off to the kids from now. Now this is not from the Iker Din. This was a Takan's Chamanusha that the kids still have to provide for the parents' needs. Now, Maskul Rabbi Zera asked, we tell me something with Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. He says, what? This was what in Usha they had to be Masakin? What do you mean? Gedolim Mizu Amri. Even greater than this case, it was already said, for example, when you have a widow and a daughter, and the daughter gets married, that even though the father died, and therefore the estate is inherited by the daughter, and it's actually meshubed, there's a lien on it, to the first loikeach, rabbinically. Who is that? For example, the husband of the daughter. He becomes the loikeach of his wife's stuff, which she inherited from her late father. The Gemara Gitna Memchesam and Beis tells us, you don't extract to feed the woman, which woman? The widow, the mother, from the chasim mishubadim. This gets fed from a late husband's estate. There's only the chasim b'nei chaydim are available assets. But things that were sold off, even after they got married, those are called, there's a lien on it. You cannot collect from the chasim mishubadim because no one want to buy stuff anymore. Because if any woman that gets widowed could go and collect for her sustenance, there's no end to that. So we said that she cannot collect for her mazon from the chasam shabbat. Now, here, the children inherit, not the wife. The children inherit. Who's the children? One daughter. That one daughter got married to a husband. That husband is considered a likeach. He's like he bought everything that his wife came into. So, halachically, the shviger, the almana, can't eat from the estate because that's the chasim mishubadim. It was already bought up by the husband of her daughter. Even so, when there's no concern for tikkun ha'olam, the reason why the almana is not fed from the chasim mishubadim is because tikkun ha'olam, which is, like we said, no one's going to want to buy because that widow, if she lives another 40 years, guess what? Something I bought from her husband when they got married. They were married for 50 years. 6 years before ago, when they were married 4 years, I bought something from him. She's going to go collect from me. She's living hundu till 127, so no one's going to want to buy. But when there's no concern of taking them, for example, like here, this lekeach, the husband of the daughter, he didn't spend anything. Although he's like a lekeach, but he's not really a lekeach. We have no concern for tikkun ha'olam. No one's going to want to buy. So the rabbis made him like a yayish. They made him like as if he's inherited. Oh, inheritor is different. The almana gets fed from the estate, from the inheritors. That's obviously inherent every time. Almana being fed, there must be children that are the Yershim. So bigger than this halacha busha, they said, almanasin is minachasav. His widow is fed from his estate, meaning from the estate of her late husband, from the husband of her daughter. So who that this man and his wife, which for sure his children are not like lekuchas at all, even though it's a matana. Do I have to tell you? Of course, did they have to really be masakin usha that the parents are going to get fed? As the Gemara explains, the Shalch Rabin B'Igati, Rabin sent in his letter the following halacha: Mishnei, if someone passed away, v'nich almana ubas, he leaves over this case that we're discussing regarding a daughter and a wife. So the halacha is almanasa in the zaynis minachasa. His widow gets fed from his estate. Moreover, Nisas Habas, when the daughter gets married, so although the rabbis had said that a husband and his wife's assets is like a lekech, is like a buyer, and Allah is that we do not feed the woman, the widow, from the chasim mishubadim, but Here the rabbis made the husband, not the late husband, the husband of the daughter, like a Yerush, because of the loss of the widow, as the Gemara explains in Yesh Neichel. So here the halach is going to be that Amanasai, which widow? The widow of the father of the daughter, is Nizainis Minachasa. She gets fed from his estate, meaning we don't say that this husband of her daughter is a foreign person. He's not an inheritor of the father. How could he be? He's not blood related to him. Rather of his own wife, which is the daughter of the father. That's like regular lekech. So maybe you would say we would not extract for the sustenance of the widow and the husband Shabbatim. No, we don't say that. We say that she does get fed from her son-in-law. And moreover, even Nesa Habas, if her own daughter dies and now her son-in-law inherits her daughter, even then, Amr Rabbi Yehuda ben Achayse Rabbi Yisrael Chanina, who's the nephew of Rabbi Yisrael Chanina, he says, Al Yadi HaYemaisa, through me there was such a story. And they said, his widow, the late husband, his widow gets fed from his estate, which is now in the hands of his son-in-law. So if that's the case, so ask the Gemara, so who be Ishtoi? So this man and his wife, were they both alive? And these are his sons. And they didn't spend any money. It was just a gift given to them. Do I have to tell you that, of course, the parents are going to get fed? Which, as Rashi points out, although a gift is like a sale regarding the laws of shibud, and if that's the case, so then who said they can get from their sons? Maybe the sons don't have to give them. But over there, most definitely that if they hadn't done something, meaning the regular matana, if someone didn't do something good to you, you wouldn't have given them a gift. So therefore, it's like a sale that you take responsibility. But regarding one's own children, you don't say that. The parents just give it b'chilim. So therefore, we're not going to treat the matana like a mecher in that way that they're kuches and they're machasim shabodim, and therefore we're not going to feed the parents. It's so obvious, says the Gemara, that of course the parents are going to get fed in this case, because even bigger than this, even a widow is going to get from her son-in-law after her own daughter passed away, which seemingly is definitely like that son-in-law is like a lekeach, and it's the chasim shabodim, for sure she shouldn't get fed. And still we say that she does. So I have to tell you, when parents give it over to their kids, who for sure they didn't spend any money on that, and they're not lekuchais. At most it's a matana, and we're not going to treat that like a mecher over here, because they didn't do anything for the parents, and the parents should give it to them. Of course the parents are going to get fed. What's the chiddush? Why do I need takana susha? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you why. Ma'odatim, what would you say? By the case of the widow that you told me, no, maybe over there where there's no one that's going to put an effort for her, because her husband passed away. She has just her daughter and her son-in-law. So, the son-in-law doesn't care about his mother-in-law, so let her go, whatever. And that's why the rabbis made a takana for her, that no, she's going to get fed from these quote-unquote nechasim shabadim that her son-in-law has. But over here, where the father and the mother are still alive, let him, he worked up a whole empire, he wrote it over to his sons, let him go back to work. Come out of retirement, take the jersey down from the rafters and go back to work. He's still alive. He could provide for him and his wife. That's the chiddush of Tekanas Usha, that even though the father himself is still alive, but if he wrote it over to his sons, then they obligated the children to feed the parents, even though he gave it all over to the sons right now. Maker at the end, the father has no rights on the kids. He wrote over the deeds and the things, contract, everything is theirs. Usha was talking isn't that for sure if we said the bigger case of Amanasa? No, Amanasa is just an old widow. Who's going to take care of her? So there, but over here, the man is still alive. He's in his 80s. He can go ahead and work, and he can take care of him and his wife. And that's the constitution that even when the husband's alive, that no, he said if he wrote it over to his kids have to provide for him. That was what was Masakin Rosh. Now, here also, like in the previous constitution, the Gemara says the following question: is the halacha like Rabbi Loi that we have such a enforcement of this halacha that the children have to feed the parents? Or is the halacha not like that? No, you wrote over to your kids, tough luck, and now they don't have to do anything, and you got to go back to work. Tashema, the Gemara actually brings a right that the halacha is not like that, and the kids don't have to feed. We don't enforce this halacha because the Reb Chanina, Reb Yomi, and these two they were standing. A certain person came along. Gochin, he bent down, and he kissed Rabbi Yonasan on his feet. So I'm like, Chanina, is my high. What's going on? How'd you get this? Why is he coming down and kiss us the feast? He says, I'll tell you the story. This man wrote over his whole estate to his sons, as he continued to have a million and aleph. Va'asisinu, and I forced them, forcibly, lozne, that the kids have to feed him. So since I went out of my way, beyond the letter of the law, to get the kids to feed him, so therefore he loves me. So the Gemara says, if you're going to say love dina, that is not halacha, you could understand different ways how to interpret this, what this means in places, but that you could understand that either he was forcing them, or that he only used words, not actual halachic force. You can understand why that is, because it's not halacha. That's enforceable. It should say that I literally forced them. So there's no thankfulness over here to like, wow, I love you. This is your job. This is the justice. This is what the halacha is supposed to be. From the fact that he went beyond the letter of the law, that's why he was loving him. So you see that this was something that we don't enforce, and therefore, like the previous takana susha, we say that although it's a beautiful takana, but it's not actually something that is enforced. And just like we said by the sons and daughters, although we try to intimidate them, but we don't force them if they're not very young children. So over here, although it's a beautiful takana that they write over their estate to the kids, ultimately it's not something that was accepted as halacha that they have to, although he did intimidate and force those kids to feed their father.